There's different ways of approaching conflict and disagreement. They all have pros and cons. There's no one right way to approach all conflicts because every situation is different. However, we usually have go-to strategies based on our strengths and weaknesses. That's why it's helpful to know the pros and cons of different conflict styles and our own tendencies so that we can make sure that for any situation, we are choosing the style that is most suitable for that situation and not just sticking with our habits and go-tos. And that is what this video is all about. Hey everyone, I'm glad to see that you've tuned into Becoming an Expert at Self-Leadership. I'm Maika, a psychologist, and I've dedicated this channel to sharing nuggets from psychology so more people can benefit from it. Recently, I was in a situation in which I was in disagreement with someone, and I thought, should I say something or just be quiet? I decided not to say anything, and then I thought, was this the best choice? And I remembered this model, went through it in my head and thought, actually, it was a pretty good choice for that situation. And I noticed how helpful it was for me in that situation to be able to reflect on this model and these styles. So I decided I want to share this with all of you so it can also help you. The main message of this model is that we need to be flexible in conflict situations, which may sound easier than it is because we all have go-tos based on our strengths and weaknesses, past experiences. Two very common go-tos are arguing no matter what or withdrawing no matter what. And the first thing this model asks us is to reflect on, what do I focus on in conflict situations? Do I focus more on the other person's needs and priorities, or do I focus more on my own needs and priorities? This axis is often called the axis of cooperativeness, and this axis is often called the axis of assertiveness. And based on these two axes, we come up with five different styles of responding to conflict. And yes, I didn't misspeak, 5. 2 of them are in this quadrant because they're pretty similar. Let's dive right in and take a look at the first style of responding to conflict: avoiding. Conflict style number 1 is avoiding the confrontation. And take note that I didn't say avoiding the conflict. I said avoiding the confrontation because by avoiding the confrontation, the conflict isn't resolved. But you can avoid the energy and time that is spent in a confrontation. And that's one of its biggest pros. It can also be a great choice if you're not sure how to proceed in a given situation and you need time to think, or if one or both parties in the conflict are very activated and flooded by emotions, and this is making it hard for them to keep an overview of what's important and think clearly, then this can be helpful as a break. It's also a great choice for trivial issues, or if you see that someone's having a bad day and you just don't want to pile anything extra onto that, or if you're having a bad day and you feel like you're just oversensitive and you might regret having made an issue out of something later. It's not a good choice if the issue is very important to either one of the conflict sides and you know that there won't be another chance to discuss it, because this mode often means that neither side or just one side will achieve their goals. And like all of the other conflict styles, it can be destructive if that's the only style we're capable of and we keep applying that to every situation. And by the way, this is not passive aggression or passive resistance, which is when it may look like you're avoiding, but then someone takes active measures to indirectly confront someone. like openly or very demonstratively ignoring someone in a meeting to create friction or make a statement, like talk to the face. No, how is it? Talk to the hand because the face ain't listening. That is not avoiding. That is passive aggression or passive resistance when someone says yes to something and then they never intend to do it or they pretend to forget when the due date comes. That's not avoiding. Accommodating. Conflict style or mode number 2 is accommodating. When you choose to act in a way that gets the other person's desires, wishes, needs fulfilled, but yours stay unfulfilled. This can be a reasonable choice if you see that the issue is more important to the other side. If they're an expert on that and just know more about it, it's good to just go along with their advice. Or if it's their birthday. What is really great about this strategy is that it emphasizes the relationship over the issue. Like when you stop arguing with someone, just to stop adding extra friction to that relationship. And relationships are super important, so this is sometimes a very good choice to make. It's sometimes regarded as like the weakest of these strategies, but that is a mistake to think like that. This strategy is just as strong as the other ones if applied flexibly and consciously. And if you do this a lot, you don't have to throw it out of the window altogether. You just need to make sure you also do more of this, which is what we'll be getting to next. Number 3, enforcing. The third conflict style or mode is called enforcing. I've also heard it being called asserting or confronting, competing sometimes also. And in this style, the person asserts their own interests, even if that means the other person doesn't get their say in things or their interests implemented in that situation. This may sound egocentric, but it really isn't. It depends on when, how, where, with what intention it's implied, and sometimes it's very important to be able to do this. For example, parents have to do this a lot. Sometimes just for the basic safety of their kids, like enforcing the rule on their child that when they cross the street up to a certain age, they will be holding hands with a grown-up. And of course, there's different ways to do that, obviously, and one can do it in a kind way, but still the parent is not giving the child the choice up to a certain age whether it wants to go across the street alone or not. Or sometimes it's also important that someone just takes charge in emergency situations when decisions need to be made quickly so that lives can be saved or disasters avoided. The downside of this strategy is that when it's applied too much, it neglects or strains very heavily relationships, and that can put a lot of friction into families, teams, or amongst friends. Number 4 and 5, compromising and collaborating. The last 2 conflict modes are in this quadrant of the model, which means that both sides get their needs met. And there's a differentiation between compromising and collaborating because we may aim to achieve the situation coming from different angles. If you come from the angle of wanting to achieve a compromise, that means you assume that both sides will have to give up on some of their interests so that both sides can get some of their interests met. But there are also situations in which both sides can get both of their interests met and perhaps even achieve more on top of that, which is a win-win situation. And that's what's called a collaboration. That may not always be possible, but what this differentiation is asking us to do is to, before we settle for a compromise, we at least try to see, and that is done by communication, if collaboration is possible. The downside of this model is that, of this mode, is that it takes time and energy to communicate about what are your interests, and then come to this win-win situation. A typical example is one that involves an orange. Two people want to use an orange for something they're making in a kitchen, but they only have one orange left. A compromise would be that they cut the orange in half and each person gets half an orange. What they could also do is start talking to each other and ask each other, what do you need the orange for? And what they find then is that person 1 wants to bake a cake and just needs the peel, and person number 2 wants to drink fresh orange juice and just needs the inside of the orange. So in that case, they can both use what they need of the orange to 100%, and neither one needs to settle for only 50% of an orange or 50% of what they want from the orange. And that's what is called a collaboration. But they would never have come to that if they immediately would have assumed, okay, the only way we can get to some sort of agreement is to compromise. That means we both get half. So that's what this model is asking us to do, is to talk to each other when we're in disagreement and find out what are the interests behind our positions so that we can combine those interests in a win-win situation. Before you leave the mental space of this video, I'd like to ask you to reflect which ones of these modes you apply most frequently and how that makes your life easier in some situations and harder in others, and which ones of these modes you would like to try to apply more in the future. And if you're new here and want to receive these types of inputs that make life easier in your feed regularly, remember to subscribe. If you want to be 100% sure that you get all of my videos recommended to you by the algorithm, also press the bell. Also, please leave a like beneath this video. Till next time, take care and remember that it's important to be flexible in the way you respond to conflicts and disagreement.